Another day, another crack in the UMass system, and this time it's ground the search for a permanent leader on the Boston campus to a halt. UMass President Marty Meehan announced yesterday that all three finalists pulled their names from consideration after a group of UMass Boston faculty announced that they felt, quote, none of the final candidates have demonstrated that they are sufficiently qualified to serve as the chancellor. In a statement yesterday, Meehan apologized to the candidates and called the complaints against them sensationalized. Henry Thomas, the search committee's chair, backed up Meehan in a statement of his own, saying of the faculty's denunciation, this petulant behavior will inflict long-lasting damage on UMass Boston's reputation and future ability to recruit the academic and administrative leaders we need at UMass Boston. But on the heels of a vote of no confidence for Meehan by the same faculty and UMass Amherst's purchase of Mount Ida, which rocked the entire system, where does the school go from here? I'm joined now by two reporters who've been following this story very closely. Jennifer Smith, news editor at the Dorchester Reporter, and Gintautas Dumcius of MassLive. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
So my big question for you is whether anyone saw the exit of these three finalists coming. Did this catch everyone by surprise, or was it expected?
Well, I think there were rumblings heading into the weekend after the faculty said they were disappointed. And there's also, the president's office has been saying it's a small group. I think it's probably a little bit bigger than that. There was some concern among the deans from what I've heard. So it's tough if you're a candidate and you see the faculty saying, like, we don't think you're qualified, or we don't think you're a good fit. It's tough for them to take the job after that.
And the thing about it is the resignations did come as a surprise, or the pulling out did. It's not so much that the discontent from the faculty was an issue, but for instance, if you talk to students, if you talk to some people that were kind of watching from the periphery, they knew there was some kind of raw feeling about the way the entire process had gone down, but I don't think anyone quite expected the bombshell of a pretty stinging rebuke from the faculty in the first place to then immediately be followed by all three candidates withdrawing their names. So I think that kind of left everyone with a bit of blowback.
Like me, you guys are not academics, you're journalists, but do you buy the argument that these three were unqualified as a group, or is that maybe an indication of other factors beyond their qualifications or lack thereof?
I think that's tough to say. Yeah. I mean, I think the faculty were clearly not pleased, and these are the people that they're going to be working with.
And working for.
And the thing about the campuses, I've been covering higher education on and off for a couple of years. There's a lot of silos on campus, and not just in the higher education system, but on campus too. And I know as a student reporter at a student newspaper, faculty and administration would each talk to me in their own way and try to get information through me about what was happening on campus. And I think that dynamic played out during the search. There was a lot of rumors, there was a lot of dissatisfaction, and that turned into a toxic atmosphere.
And Jen, am I right that there was also dissatisfaction among the faculty that they were not structurally a bigger part of the search for a new chancellor, right? They had 2 of 15 slots on the search committee?
Yeah, so they were upset about that. I think one thing as well was just the general structure of the way that the on-campus meetings happened, which was kind of the very last component of the search right before the statement went out, right before everyone withdrew their names, was they brought all three candidates to UMass Boston to come and sit down with elected officials and their staffs, faculty and their staffs, and members from the greater Boston area or the UMass Boston community. And there was some concern over actually just the timing of those meetings.
They did it in final exams,
Yeah,
right?
They did it in the middle of final exams. There was an email that went out to, for instance, elected officials on Friday night, I believe it was, that there would be a few hour slots throughout the next week where you could come in and meet the potential chancellors. So that was a component as well, which is not only did they feel that they weren't necessarily represented fully on the search committee to begin with, but then they weren't able to actually kind of have their one-on-one time.
It's so weird because given all the problems that we've seen at UMass Boston, you would think that they would be taking great pains to do everything right for this pivotal process, and it sounds, from your description, I'm putting words in your mouth, like they almost did the opposite. Well, I should give you a chance to respond to my crude paraphrase of your point.
That's okay, lest I get emails. I mean, I think that there were definitely communication issues. I don't think anyone would actually dispute that. I think the question mostly revolves around what's the obligation of the university to specifically set aside time for what members of what part of the UMass Boston community, and to what extent should they be given face time with all of these candidates. Also, the students weren't really involved. I mean, that's an additional thing.
Can you both tell me a little more about how students are feeling about this? Because as I've consumed news about it from a distance, it seemed to me like it's the UMass Boston faculty versus Marty Meehan and the UMass Boston administrative establishment. Where do the students come down? I remember I was over there right when the Mount Ida purchase hit, doing a story for Greater Boston, and the students seemed to be kind of simpatico with the faculty. They felt this was a slap in the face. I had the sense that they saw the faculty as allies and pushing back against that. Do students still see the faculty as allies?
Well, there was a student government, their Twitter accounts started tweeting out after the faculty started warring with me and about the Chancellor search. The student government account started saying, like, well, it's disappointing that it came to this, and we're disappointed that the faculty played a role in deep sixing the search here. So I think, as with any campus, there's a whole spectrum of opinion, usually on the left, but even within the left, there's a lot of opinion and difference. And I think we're still sorting out. We're still hearing from people on a daily basis about this.
Yeah, I just talked to the head of that student government organization, Katie Matrano, earlier today, and she was very, very vociferous about her disapproval about the faculty's actions. She said they forced this kind of chaos upon the campus, where, as far as the students were concerned, what they wanted, again, was access and involvement at the table when this decision was being made. They did not want kind of this like grenade to go off, where, as far as the students were concerned, they had 3 seemingly perfectly qualified candidates at least to move on to a stage where the students could talk with them.
And I would think that if you were a student and your institution has had all this instability in recent months, you would sort of be craving someone to come in and establish a measure of calm and focus and forward-orientedness.
That was the first thing she said,
really?
Which is that the major issue is, you know, Barry Mills is an interim chancellor. It's now going to be replaced with another interim chancellor. And it's coming off of Keith Motley leaving in 2017. So there's a lot of chaos, and they really want someone to kind of right the ship on a permanent
Jennifer,
basis.
you're really on point with your transitions, because I wanted to ask you about Keith Motley.
Master
I want to ask you both
segues.
about this. Your paper,
Yes.
the Dorchester Reporter, is urging UMass to bring Keith Motley back. Can you, too, recap for us, for people who might not be familiar, there we have a look at Bill Forey's editorial, which I know you didn't write.
I did not.
What was the reason for Keith Motley's departure, and what's the reporter's case, and maybe the broader case, for having him return?
Well, I can say that there's certainly a sentiment among some folks that Keith Motley was scapegoated. All this talk about financial problems at UMass Boston, those problems go back a long time. I was looking over some documents from 2004, a Board of Trustees meeting, and that same issue about debt, same issue about having to build dorms, and back then looking for a chancellor.
Some of it's from the 70s, some of the structural issues.
Right, and that's, I think John Keller has called it the godfather of the big dig. In terms of that superstructure.
It's a very Keller-esque formulation. And it's because, tell me if I'm wrong about this, the campus was built on terrain that is structurally unsound, right? Is that
and there was some corruption in the contracts that went out as well. I believe some elected officials went to jail over it.
Where some of the structures of the buildings themselves have been so compromised since even their initial construction to begin with that they've been trying to dig out from that. When was the garage closed? You remember reporting?
2006, I believe.
2006, yeah.
So what's the case for having Motley return? Even if he got a raw deal and was unfairly blamed for some of these problems, what would he potentially bring back as an asset?
I think what the point that Bill was making, obviously, it's an editorial decision, so it's sort of separate from the news side, is that one of the big advantages to Keith Motley was his institutional knowledge of UMass Boston. He really spearheaded a lot of the expansion over the decade that he was there, and there's still a lot of warm feelings about him with the campus community. They're mixed feelings, to be sure, because along with that expansion also came additional levels of financial instability. So he was kind of the figurehead for this new era of putting UMass Boston on the map in a real way and saying that this is a campus that deserves to be as invested in as the flagship.
I remember interviewing him a few years back before he was ousted and thinking he was so bullish on the future of UMass Boston that I remember thinking that for my kids, who are still fortunately quite a ways away from college, this could actually be a decent place for them to end up. He just seemed so excited and made such a good case.
Yeah, I was actually there at the very last student government meeting when Keith Motley was leaving, and it was his last remarks to the student body. And I mean, even up until that last day, he was pointing out the window and telling them, like, we're going to come back here in 15 years and the campus is going to be transformed.
Last question for you guys. This idea of a City of Boston run UMass Boston, it's been floated by Marty Walsh and Steve Lynch. Am I right to think that this is totally preposterous?
Well, I think we asked Marty Meehan about this the other day, and he said, well, that's a lot of debt for the city to acquire. I think that's a tough one. It's unclear how much the mayor wants to pursue this. He's got a lot on his plate, Long Island Bridge, a lot of other projects he has to pursue.
And his own school system.
Right.
So,
yeah.
So I think that's going to be, let's see if he's going to do something. Let's see what he does.
Yeah, exactly. And I asked him to what extent he was seriously floating this, and I think it was more that he was asked a direct question and didn't want to preclude any options from being on the table in the future, which is, he said, if UMass Boston says the city should be a partner in this, we'd love to be a partner in it, but not to just say absolutely not.
All right. Jennifer Smith, the Dorchester Reporter, Gintautas Dumcius of the Springfield Republican and MassLive. Thank you both.
Of course, thanks.